Namaskar. Welcome to this series on Bhagavad Geeta in daily life. Today we are going to talk about how we can control our sense organs, the senses, by self-restraint, and what Bhagavad Geeta tells us about this. We all experience that our greatest challenge is to control ourselves. And this is the paradigm shift of vision that Bhagavad Gita gives us. Constantly in our automated life, we try to control others, we try to change others. But Bhagavad Gita gives us this understanding that what we need to do is change our own self for the better. And this controlling of ourselves, or changing ourselves, or restraining ourselves is one of the most difficult parts and where Bhagavad Gita focuses on. The sense control or Indriya Sanyam is the first step towards our self-restraint or self-control. And Bhagavad Gita talks a lot about, Shri Krishna talks in the second adhyaya, the third adhyaya, the fourth adhyaya, and later on even in the 18th adhyaya, he talks about this Indriya Sanyam. So Indriyas is a new concept for us. Let us understand what are these Indriyas. There are 5 Gnanendriyas and 5 Karmendriyas. Total there are 10 Indriyas according to our Shastra. And the 5 Gnanendriyas are the Shrotrendriya through which we hear, the Chakshurendriya through which we see, the Granendriya through which we smell, the Jivva from where we taste, and the Tvagendriya from where we touch. So all these 5 Gnanendriyas imbibe the information and the knowledge from the outside world, the objects around, and give us to our inner Sukshma Sharir, the mind and the intellect for processing this information. So this is what is the work of the Gnanendriyas. The 5 Karmendriyas are the action senses which help us to do our karma, to do our physical activity, cheshtas. And these 5 Karmendriyas are the hand, the feet, our tongue, how we speak, and then 2 of our excretory organs. These are the 5 Karmendriyas through which. So how can we have the Indriya Sanyam? And the most important Sanyama is in the Gnanendriya, because these are the ones which are constantly in search of getting all the information from the outside world. According to our scriptures, our senses are Bahirmukha. They are naturally going outwardly. And that is why we cannot sit, relax and meditate ourselves, because naturally the tendency of our senses is to go out, look out for any information, knowledge. That's why we want to see the TV, the news, talk to people, get lot of information. And they are very chanchala, very, very wavering. They keep on going from one object to the other. That is how the natural tendency of our senses is. And this is how the scheme of events is, that all the senses, they take the outside, the knowledge from the outside objects, and those outside objects also include the body. Body is also like an outside object for us. It is not part of our own inner self. And then it takes it to the mind, which processes the information, does all the sankalpa, vikalpa, all the options. Thinking part is the mind. And then the intellect is the decision maker, decides, nishchayatmika, nishchay prana, jo decision making skill hai, that is the intellect. And then Indriya Sanyam is also called as Dhamma, and that requires a lot of efforts from our part. And then gradually it becomes more natural as the mind becomes more aligned with our values, our thoughts, our Shastra, and this becomes effortless, and this is called Shama. So Shama, Dhamma, Uparati, these are all the sadhan, chatushtaya, sampatti, which we need to have so that we can progress on this path and become eligible for the divine knowledge that Shri Krishna gives us in Bhagavad Gita. So the mind control or the Manas Sanyama is a very, very important part where Bhagavad Gita focuses, and all of our spiritual journey is towards disciplining our mind. And that is the focus of the Gita Ji, how we can discipline our mind. And this kind of an emotional maturity of the mind, it takes time and efforts. The body naturally grows as the age advances, but the mind does not grow naturally over a period of time. It requires efforts. We need to give time. We need to understand our mind. We need to learn how to live with our mind and get the right understanding, and then quieten the mind. And this maturity of the mind is very, very important. And gradually, as it becomes more and more mature, understanding, it becomes more effortless, it forms the right habits. We change our old habits or patterns of thinking and develop the right kind of attitudes, the positive thinking as we call it. And this is the main purpose of Gita Ji, to cause or to create the emotional maturity of our mind so that we can restrain or control ourselves. And what does Gita Ji tell us? Let us see. So in the second Adhyaya, where Bhagwan Krishna gives us the message, the real spiritual message, he makes us understand in all the shlokas starting from the 11th to the 38th, and then talks about the Karma Yoga. And finally he says that this kind of mindless sense pleasures, Bhogeshwarya Prasaktanam, Bhoga and Aishwara, we are all, always involved in the pursuit of these kind of sense pleasures outside. All the good food that we want to eat, the good clothes that we want, the good cars and the good vehicles that we want to drive, the good houses that we want to live, all this are the sense pleasures. And if we just exclusively pursue this without any other understanding in our life, then our mind is also robbed. Aya payata chetasam. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. We don't develop this kind of a focus intellect. Well-listened understanding does not happen, and this does not allow us to give peace of our mind. Samadho no vidiyate. That samadhi avastha, that peace, inner peace, we can't feel it because we are all involved in the outer senseless pleasures of the world, of the objects, desires, and all this does not give us a real peace. This is what Shri Krishna gives us, a completely different understanding. We believe that the outer objects give us happiness, and that's why we keep pursuing on these outer objects. But Krishna tells us that Indriya Sanyama is very, very important. In the final part of the second Adhyaya, where he talks about the Sthita Prajna, the wisdom, the person who is ascertained in wisdom, what are his attributes? He gives an example of turtle. Yada samharate kurbongani vasakvasha. Just like a turtle withdraws all of its gleams when it faces danger. Similarly, a wise person is the one who withdraws all his sense organs when they all move around and go for objects. And that person only has attained firm wisdom, and that is called Sthita Prajna. So that is what this awareness in our conduct constantly, where our senses are going, where are they grazing, whether we have a mind restraint or not, what is our understanding, inner understanding, what is our intellect doing at that point of time, is something that a wise person has a very good control over its senses, mind and intellect. And this is the main difference between a wise and unwise person. And what are the power of the senses? Shri Krishna decodes in this shloka, Indriyani Ramatini. He says, even for those person, Yatataha api purushasya, the person who keeps on trying, person who is a seeker, who makes efforts to go on this path, who is a viveki, who uses his intellect, understanding. But even for this people, Indriyani Pramatini, he says the sense organs are very powerful. They will just haranti prasabham manaha. They will kidnap the mind by force. And this is how we are not able to remain at peace with ourselves, because these sense organs, we have never tried to cultivate them properly by our mind. Tani sarvani sanyam. Control all your sense organs. Indriya, mana, be equipoised, yukta, be balanced, samatva, and asita, have a firm resolve, matparaha, surrender to the divine, do your best and leave the rest to the divinity, karmanyavadikaraste, do your actions well, mapaleshu kadachana, don't worry about the results. He says, surrender to the divine. This is how if you live our life. And persons whose senses are restrained, vashehi yasya indriyani tasya prajna pratishtita, only then the intellect becomes more certain, the knowledge becomes more firm, that person becomes a sthita prajna, and only this is possible by doing Indriya Sanyama. So Indriya Sanyama is very, very important to get the right knowledge and understanding. Again, he talks about the power of the senses, Indriyanam, Charatam, the sense organs. He says, keep roaming, just like the cow keeps grazing, Charati, Iti. Senses keep also roaming in different objects from one to the other. Mana anuvidhyate. The mind also follows the senses, because mind also does not think. Tasya harati prajnam. Even the intellect is kidnapped. That is the power of the senses. How Vayu nam imam basi. Just like the wind blows away the boat which is there on the shore without tide knot, just keeps blowing according to the wind here and there, here and there. Similarly, our senses, mind, intellect keeps moving around in different objects here and there without any restraint, without any control. So we need to be aware of our senses and its movements, and that is what Shri Krishna teaches us. Again, in the final part of the second Adhyaya, again talks about Indriya Sanyam, Te Mahabaho. It tells Arjuna, you have won over a lot of outer enemies, but now it is this inner enemies that you have to win over. When all the sense objects are withdrawn naturally, then Tasya Prajna Pratishtita, that knowledge becomes steady, becomes Sthita Prajna. Now, what is that part or that thing because of which all these problems happen? And that main the vision of Gita ji is focuses on the raga and the dvesha. Raga, dvesha are our strong likes and dislikes for particular things, particular objects, particular persons, particular situations, particular relationships, particular objects. And all these are the main cause of our problems, why our sense control does not happen. So here, in the second, third and fourth adhyaya, Shri Krishna touches on this, that indriyasya indriyasar arthe. Now all these four objects, sabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha, are the five objects of these five senses. Raga, dvesha, vyavasita. The strong likes and dislikes are firmly rooted in this sense organs. Tayor navashamagacche. Krishna says, don't get under its influence, because now yasya paripanti, now they are your biggest enemies. They are your biggest obstacles on the path of your progress, on your understanding, on your learning, on your spiritual journey. Because these likes and dislikes, we need to understand how we can manage them. We have to be aware first that the enemies are not outside, the enemies are inside. They're very subtle, they're very stubborn, difficult to even understand for us what are these likes, dislikes. But once we become aware of this, we know how it works and how we think, how we react to different situations. So raga, dvesha are our attachments and our aversions, and it is our nature, our swabhava that determines our actions, our behavior. But how is it controlled? And that is based on these strong likes and dislikes, raga, dvesha. We feel that it is our natural response. We feel that this is my swabhava, that is my nature, that is how I behave, that is how I react. But this is all unawareness. Shri Krishna tells us that we need to be aware of how we behave. So when sense organs interact with its objects, there is this feeling of happiness, pleasure. For example, if we get some heater or a burner or an electric this thing in a very cold weather, we feel good, we feel happy that now we have been taken care of the cold. And that is why we try to go towards this kind of action. That is causes a raga, that is a sense of pleasure. Dvesha is something like an aversion. Say for example, in the scorching heat, nobody wants to go out in the open with a scorching heat of 45 degrees centigrade. And that's why we remain away going out. We remain in an air-conditioned area where we feel better, comfortable. So this is our dvesha towards the heat in the summer. Similarly, this could be for persons, for different objects, for praises, for good food. We have particular aversions, affinity, attachments, aversions. Most of us are foodies. We love food, particular type of food. So this is how the raga, dvesha work. And how our response, our reaction is determined in our day-to-day life is based on this raga, dvesha. So I emulate or try to do something that I like to do, and I don't do something that I don't like to do. That is what my natural behavior is. From here, Shri Krishna tells us, and Bhagavad Gita teaches us, that we need to go more towards our value-based actions, based on our dharma, our adharma. What is the right thing to do? What is the correct thing I should do? Not just based on whether I like it or not, but what is good for me? What is good for the society? What are the norms of the society? What are those moral or ethical values, or those universal life values based on which I should take my action? And this is what is the journey of our progress in life. And this journey is to soften our grip of our raga, dvesha, our strong likes and dislikes. And this helps to purify our inner mind ultimately. And then this needs a lot of awareness. We have to put in a lot of efforts. And this is an area of our free will. This is not an area of our destiny. We should not say that this is my nature, I just behave like that. No, this is an area where we have a free will to react, to determine how we want to respond to a particular situation, whether we want to have a raga, dvesha, whether we want to have samatva, how we want to respond. This is an area of our will. So now Shri Krishna tells us, don't get under its spell. Tayor navashamagachet. This is an area of free will, not an area of destiny. I need to work. I need to keep my goal in my mind while we take decisions. What are my values? And then use my intellect. When the desire or the thought arises, use the understanding that I have and see the entire side of the situation. There are people who will see a lot of the other side of the situation. It's called the 360-degree view. There are two sides. One is the good side, one is not so good side. If you can take the entire view of the situation, of the person, and this attitude of overall vision, then you can see from the long term, whether it is beneficial to me or not, whether this is a short-term benefit, is there a short-term pain which is going to give me a long-term gain, or it is going to be a short-term gain which is going to give me a long-term pain. Based on my understanding, I will take the right decision. And this is how we all, so many of us have different kinds of addictions, because we see just the short-term view, we see the short-term pleasure, we don't see the long-term outcome of this situation. That's why daily introspection is a very, very effective tool. Finally, in the last part of the third adhyaya, which is the Karma Yoga adhyaya, Shri Krishna shows the final two shlokas, he shows the hierarchy of power, how it happens. He says, Indriyani parani apohu. Senses are superior to all these objects, the body, because they get all the information from outside. Indriyabhya param manah. Superior to the senses is the mind, because mind gets information from all the five sources of senses. Manah tu parah buddhi. And above this mind is the intellect. This is the hierarchy of our power. It says intellect is superior to the mind because it can control the mind. Tuya buddhe paratas. But even beyond the intellect is our real self, Atma Swarupa, Chaitanya, our consciousness, which is the knower of everything. And that's why in the final shloka of the third adhyaya, Bhagavan tells us that it's only by this knowledge, by this gnana, we can perish all our desires and become quiet, and we can become self-restrained by knowing what is above this intellect, our own consciousness, getting aware of this consciousness, and by controlling our mind and intellect by knowing this consciousness, which is a Nirgun Swarupa, which is Akarta Swarupa. It's only all this karma, karta, kana, it happens in the mind and the intellect. Jahi Shatrum, conquer our enemies. Our biggest enemies are our Kama Rupam, Durasadam. All our desires, endless pursuits, desires based out of our Raga, Dvesha, which gives a lot of pain and miseries to us in our life, day-to-day life. We can only control, but the final solution, Bhagavan says, is by knowing this intellect, the Atma, the consciousness, which is above the intellect, our own real Swarupa. And that is the only way we can understand is by meditation completely on our true self, our consciousness, and then understanding with this we can control. In the fourth adhyaya, Bhagavan talks about the 12 different kinds of yagna. Here also he shows the Jnanendriya Sanyama, the sense control, is one of the yagna. Again, he shows the renouncing, the seeking of our objects. Constantly we want to seek objects, we want to get objects, thinking that these objects give us the pleasure. And he says, Vishaya Havan Rupa Yagna is also one of the kind of yagna. And then this is the only way we can become from Swachanda. There is also independence from the Western terminology. I am independent, I can do whatever I like. But the Indian concept, our Sanatan Dharma, is that real independence is being in Swatantra, without being Paradhin, just by being Swadhin, by awareness, by doing moderation, by Sanyam, we can only attain that true independence, and that is called Swatantrata, not Swachandata. Again, Shri Krishna shows that mind restraint is also one of the yagnas. He calls this in the fourth adhyaya, and he says that can be only illuminated by our jnana, our light of knowledge. That is part of the yoga sadhana. Again, in the fifth adhyaya, Bhagavan says that senseless gratification of our sense objects is not advisable. It causes a lot of pain. He says, Sansparshaja bhoga. All those pleasures obtained by contact of the sense organs with the objects, different objects, dukkha yonava evate. He says they are the cause for misery. We think that it gives us temporary happiness, but it makes us dependent on those kind of objects. We keep indulging into them, and then we become dependent on them, and it's ultimately giving us miseries or pain in the long run. Adyantavanta kaunte. Bhagavan says they come and go, they are all transient. Don't just pursue your life into these kind of objects. Today they will give you happiness, tomorrow you will not get happiness from this. They are all adyantavanta. Nateshu ramate buddha. The wise people don't indulge in them. They understand the nature of these sense pleasures. They are all adyantavanta, dukkha yonava. It says all the sense objects, and that's why we, instead of going into too much of bhoga, which gives us roga, leads to miseries, roga, it's better to go into yoga, where we can unite with the divinity, and that will give us real inner peace. Even in the sixth Adhyaya, which is Atma Sanyama Yoga, where Bhagavan talks about meditation, he says that Indriya Sanyama is most important for meditation, and self-restraint is the real happiness. He says the person who has controlled his body, mind, intellect, all his body, mind complex is the person who becomes peaceful, tranquil. And divinity can only be established in such a person who has self-restraint, and that a person who has samatva in all these dualities of this world. And that is what we need to do. And who can do this meditation? Only that person who is a muni, a mananashila, somebody who has conquered his senses, mind, intellect, has a control over his life, whose goal is clear, and who has let go of all these desires, fears, anger. That is the only person who can sit in meditation and meditate on the true inner self and get such a person can become free from this samsara chakra. And finally, Bhagavan says that person who does not have self-control, even dhyana yoga, meditation is very difficult to succeed. But a person who has full control over himself, meditation, dhyana yoga is possible. And this is his opinion. So that's why we should constantly try to change our habits, constantly practice and focus on our goal. Finally, Bhagavan says that for the person who has self-restraint, he says, Tasyaham sulabha partha, I am easily attainable. Divinity can only be established in a person who has self-restraint. And that's what Bhagavan is trying to tell us in this shloka of the 8th Adhyaya. So to summarize, senseless pursuit of sense pleasures is deprecated in our Shastra, in our scriptures, in Bhagavad Geeta, which talks about Indriya Sanyama, which is with efforts, and then finally we have to lead to what is called a Shama, the Mana Sanyama, which becomes effortless. Shri Krishna gives the example of a turtle, how it withdraws all its limbs into the shell when they see any danger from the objects outside. Similarly, we can also learn to live like that. Ramathini Indriyani, the sense organs are very, very powerful. Haranti Prasapam Manaha, they kidnap the mind, and that's why Shri Krishna tells us, Tani Sarvani Sanyam, control all your sense organs. And the root cause of the problems is Raga Dvesha Vyavastita. He says these strong likes and dislikes don't get under its influence because they are your biggest enemies. You have to be aware about these raga, dvesha, how they work, how they are very subtle, how they work. We need to be aware, understand them. And all these sense pleasures are with the understanding that they are adyantavanta. They come and go, dukkhayo nava. They give us a long-term miseries, they make us dependent. And that's why nateshu ramate buddha, the wise do not indulge in them. And this is how we can understand, with this understanding we can come out. It's not that just by fulfilling desires we can overcome these sense pleasures, because they keep on fulfilling them, they will keep on coming. It's like, pouring of ghee in a flame. It will keep on, the flame will keep lighting. Similarly, these desires will come back again and again. But the way to control or understand is by understanding, by right kind of understanding, we can actually transgress them. We can get over this kind of desires, try to fulfill them without, try to kind of get over them without fulfilling them by a right understanding. With this, if we can learn our self-control, we can master anything in our life. And this is the crux of Bhagavad Gita, where we can really focus on our own self. So I pay my respects and gratitudes to Almighty Lord, with whose grace everything is possible. I pay my respects to this Guru Shishya Parampara, through which this knowledge is preserved, transmitted through generations. I pay my respects to my Guruji, Puja Guruma, with whose grace I am able to learn the scriptures and share this understanding with you. Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.